God, I hope I didn't break one of those. Controllers. You either love them or hate them. But either way, controllers are needed to play games. And if you've not realized, I like playing games. So yeah, today I genuinely just wanted to talk about controllers, specifically Nintendo ones, you can probably tell from the title of the video. So, Nintendo controllers, where should we start? Well, I guess the first one, the NES controller. Technically not the first Nintendo controller, that would go to the controller for the Color Game TV, as that was Nintendo's first home console. However, this is the one that everyone remembers as the first Nintendo controller. And my god, yeah, it's alright. I mean, the NES controller, it's as simple as can be. You got 4 directions on your directional pad here, a select button, a start button, A, B, that's it. It's as simple as it gets, and it works phenomenally for NES games. Like, absolutely perfectly for them. Mario, Zelda, all of it works perfectly. It's a good controller. You know, you got all the buttons you need right here. You start and select. It's the base controller, and this is the start of where modern controllers came from. You can see even features in modern controllers. A and B button, D-pad, start, select, and where they're placed. The D-pad didn't have to be placed on this side of the controller. It could have been placed here, and we could have been moving our character with the right joystick instead of the left. We move with the left because of this controller. It's cool, and the thing is it looks clean as well. You know, it's clean, it's simple, little box. Now, a lot of people have complained about this thing digging into their palms like this. I don't think you're supposed to hold it like that. I think you're supposed to hold it like this, and if you're holding it like that, it's actually fairly comfortable. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say on the NES controller. It's a nice little simple controller, but it can get better. And this is proof of things getting better. I mean, the SNES controller, to this day, is still one of the best controller revisions, I guess? It's not really a revision because it's a new console, but for when it came out, this thing is amazing. It's comfortable to hold. It's got your 4 buttons here for extra buttons. You can do extra things. You can have extra movements mapped to different buttons. It's the beginning of shoulder buttons with L and R here. And then you've still got your D-pad. You start. It's just so amazingly good. It feels nice. It's well built. The cable is decently long on it. This thing is just amazing. I mean, there's not much I can say about the SNES controller that really anyone else hasn't already said. I mean, it's just such a good controller. It's, again, this is another one of the base controllers that started how controllers look like today. The reason we have 4 buttons and not 3 or 5 or 1 is because of this controller. Nintendo really did really well with this thing. Then they made this. What is this? Why does it have 3? How are you supposed to hold this thing? This is supposed to be a controller, not a trident. The N64 controller, infamously, is one of the weirdest controllers ever to exist. But surprisingly, it's not the weirdest controller I've ever held. It's not good, don't get me wrong, it's not an amazing controller, but it functions. The joystick is pretty god-awful. Your finger slips off this thing really easily. It, infamously, if you know any bit of Nintendo lore, this thing caused blisters on the hands of many children because of Mario Party and one minigame in it. So, that was definitely a flaw of it. But it was the first controller to have an analog stick, something which is a complete staple. Again, another Nintendo controller creating a staple in the industry. You have your Z button here as well, then you still got your L and R, your D-pad here. You know, and then the C buttons, which were also very important, as this would eventually transform into the C stick, or the right stick that we now use to control cameras. So yeah, I mean, I do kind of like the N64 controller because it's so goofy, and you can definitely see where a lot of the older controller design philosophy came in, because, to be fair, if you cut off the 3 prongs, it's just a souped up SNES controller, so Nintendo has been carrying through their design philosophy, and they did still keep the colors of the SNES controller with the red, green, blue, and yellow, so I'll give them props for that. But, yeah, things could really only get better from here. Wait, so you're telling me after the N64 controller, they managed to make something that doesn't look like a trident? The GameCube controller. Oh my god, do I love this thing. Now, I'm not a Smash Melee player here, and I'm not trying to sound like one. However, this thing is just so good. The analog triggers, this is one of only 2 Nintendo controllers to have analog triggers. The only other one was the Wii Classic controller. And that's not even a proper controller. This thing is just amazing. I mean, the only flaw I can really call out on the GameCube controller is the lack of a second shoulder button here, and the D-pad is really bad, but it's a GameCube controller. You don't use the D-pad for pretty much anything. One thing, obviously, everyone notes this, the GameCube button layout. What is this? I mean, it's so wacky, but it works so well. The A button being the most common button you use, of course, being placed right in the center with all the other buttons around it just feels right. The C stick is infamously it's a bit of a nub, but it's not as bad as a lot of people complain about it being. And the normal stick, it's just actually really good. This is such an improvement from the N64 controller, like, my god. You can tell that a lot of people like it because people still use this controller to this day on Smash Bros. Games. On Smash Ultimate, Nintendo has GameCube controller adapters for the Switch and, well, originally for the Wii U as well, so they could play Smash 4 with this thing. People love this thing, and no wonder they do. I mean, it's great. How can Nintendo possibly go wrong from here? They went wrong from here. So, from the GameCube controller to the stick, right, so the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, I mean, it's the Wii Remote and Nunchuck. This is, when I think Nintendo controller, I either think N64 controller or this thing. I mean, come on. This thing is just so goofy. This screams Nintendo. Having what is essentially just a TV remote as the controller for your game, and then to have analog controls having a connected analog stick. This is one of the most Nintendo creations ever. And I know so many people complain about the motion controls, but to be honest, they're not that bad. Now, don't get me wrong, they are not amazing, they're not good, but they're not as bad as a lot of people claim them to be. And additionally, with the nunchuck attached, this is one of, actually, my top Nintendo controllers. Especially for something like Mario Kart, this thing works amazingly. If you ever played Mario Kart Wii with this combo, it really works well. The Wii Remote and Nunchuck combo, it does in fact work. You can play N64 games with it because the N64 can use the D-pad as its C-sticks. So the Wii had N64 emulation and this controller did the job perfectly fine. And obviously you had the games like Wii Sports, which, well, it's Wii Sports. And, you know, this thing is intuitive to use, you know? Any old person knows that. You point it at the thing and it does the thing. Simple! Honestly, the Wii Remote, it's goofy, but I like it, man. And that's not just because I really like the Wii. I genuinely think the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, it's not a bad controller. The buttons feel pretty decent. They're not of low quality at all. The analog stick on the Nunchuck is actually pretty good. The Z button, the C button here, they're decently nice. The B button on the back of the Wii Remote is surprisingly really nice. This is a really nice one. It's just really good. And then they made this fucking abomination. So the Wii U gamepad is a controller, kind of, and the stylus fell out. Yeah, that was something that I had a big issue with this thing, was losing the stylus, because this thing came with a stylus, and let's be honest, what the hell is this thing? I mean, I will say, the Wii U gamepad is incredibly comfortable to hold. It does mold into your hands really well, and it's kind of like a Steam Deck. It's kind of like a Steam Deck in the way that, you know, it's alright. This thing keeps falling on this damn stylus. But, you know, it's alright. It works. It has a screen. It was definitely the inspiration for the Switch, so I'll give it that. But you know, people complain about the Wiimote so much, and they'll complain about the Wii U, but they never talk about the gamepad. And honestly, I'm actually kind of glad they don't. The gamepad is, again, decently comfortable to hold. Now, is it the best type of controller? Oh god, no, it's not. However, it definitely does work. You got your analog sticks. The analog sticks are pretty decent. The triggers on the back, these are decent. These are, kind of clicky. These ones feel more cheap, but these ones, the ZR and ZL ones, are actually pretty good. The D-pad is decent. I actually do quite like the D-pad. It's like the perfect mix between a nice old-fashioned Nintendo mushy D-pad and the newer clicky ones they do. You know, the A, X, Y, B buttons, they're decent, alright. Home button, that works and all, and I just turned it on. But you know, it works. And to be honest, what more could you want from it? Except for literally anything. This is not what I meant. The joycons. The second most new Nintendo controller, kind of? I think the Pro Controller is newer than them, so yeah, second most new. These are wacky little things. They are, to me, personally, I'll give the criticisms of them first. They're minuscule. These things are tiny. I could eat these things in a bite. One bite, and these things could be gone. These things aren't large. They are very small, for small, you know, for any normal size hands. I don't even have particularly large hands, and these are still really small and a bit finicky to use. The buttons are clicky. This is supposed to be a way you're supposed to be able to use them. It really doesn't work that well. But, I mean, I do kind of like the Joy-Cons. I mean, they are a bit of a callback to the Wiimote and Nunchuck with how you can kind of just use them anywhere. You don't have to have it as a rigid controller setup, though you can using the grip. But you don't have to use the grip and use a rigid controller setup where you're in one spot with a set controller size. You can kind of move them around the space, which is something that I kind of like. Like, sometimes I'll have my arms to my sides and, you know, I'll just be playing like that. And it works perfectly fine. So, these things, there's not too much to say about them. They're alright. They're not my favorite controller to use. But as a base controller for a console, they're alright. Alright, fine, we'll move on to the Pro Controller. This thing, this is the culmination of Nintendo's efforts in. My God, is this thing amazing. The buttons feel so high quality, so good. The D-pad on the Pro Controller is so nice. The analog sticks are big and meaty and nice. They're just amazing. The triggers are still digital, they're not analog, which is a bit annoying, but God, this thing is good. I really, 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 really love the Pro Controller. It is just such a good controller, man. And the way that it's slightly less angled at the side here compared to something like an Xbox controller just makes it, for me personally, just more comfortable to hold and use. This is my go-to controller for anything. If it's on the Switch, I'll be using this. If I'm playing a game on PC, like I'm playing something on an emulator and I want to use a controller, I'll generally use this thing. It's just so good. This, it's just amazing. It works really well. It feels amazing. I adore the Pro Controller, and it is by far my favorite controller out of all Nintendo controllers. Like, the GameCube controller, it is good, and I really do like it. It's probably my second favorite, but this thing is just on another level in terms of comfort and how it works, and this not being a little knob and the D-pad working so nicely. It just works so well as a controller, and I do love it. But, yeah, I think that's all of them. Wait a minute. Okay, we'll cover these two quickly. So, I'm not going to cover every accessory controller Nintendo's ever had, but I will cover two of them, because these two are kind of some of the more unique ones. Let's start with this. The NES Zapper. This was used as a light gun for the NES for the games like Duck Hunt and whatever else was like Duck Hunt. You would shoot it at the TV, it would detect that you've shot at a certain place, and then something would happen in the game, like you'd shoot a duck. Simple. I've used this thing, and it is genuinely really comfortable to hold and genuinely really fun to use. Like, Duck Hunt is genuinely a good game with this thing. I really love it. And something that's interesting is that this thing won't work on any modern TV. If you fire this at a modern TV, it won't work. It only works on old CRTs. And it's because, well, CRTs are different and they process video differently or something, I don't know, some sort of technical mumbo jumbo. Either way, it only works on old TVs, but honestly that kind of makes it a little bit cooler, because if you use it on a modern TV, it won't do anything, but you use it on an old one, it does something. It's like the old TV works as a key to make it work. Alright, we'll talk about it. The Wii Classic Controller. I don't know how to feel about it. This is the other controller that I said that had analog triggers, and these analog triggers cannot be used in any Wii game, so there is no reason for them. As far as I'm aware, these do not get used anywhere, but they are analog triggers. They do have pressure sensitivity, but they don't get used anywhere. The buttons here are kind of solid. They don't go down as much as I'd like them to, but they're alright. The sticks are okay, but they are stupidly close together that your thumbs, they hit each other all the time. These two things are here, and this button here, as some people might know, was supposed to be used for an accessory that would connect this thing to, I believe, the Wii remote itself, and, well, the accessory was never released. The D-pad is kind of mid-tier. It's not an amazing D-pad. The buttons here are it's just an controller. And the wire comes out the bottom for some reason. I to this day don't get why the wire comes out the bottom. This controller, however, its primary use was not to play Wii games. This was made to play SNES games. Compare it side by side to a SNES controller. You remove the bottom half, and they are identical. On the Wii's Virtual Console, you could play different games. I'd already mentioned you could play N64 games. However, you could also play SNES games and NES games. And for SNES games particularly, that's what this was for. That's why it's called the Wii Classic Controller. It's supposed to kind of emulate a classic SNES controller. You know, this was just here so you could use it on, like, Mario Kart Wii if you felt like it. But really, it was meant for Virtual Console SNES games, where you have your D-pad here, your X, Y, A, B buttons here, and they all feel like a SNES controller. Your shoulder buttons feel like a SNES controller. It is basically just a SNES controller. And when thinking of it in that way, I actually really like it. Also, fun fact, because of the connection here to it, you can use this on the NES and SNES mini consoles, and it does work, which I think is a fun, cool little feature Nintendo decided to add in. They didn't have to, but they did. But that actually is all the controllers. That's all of them that I have to show today. So yeah. So what's the verdict here? Well, Nintendo certainly knows that controllers exist. They have made some weird ones and some really good ones. But overall, Nintendo's controllers have kind of been, alright. I mean, they're not the best ones out on the market, but when they're bad, they're bad. But when they're good, they are really good. And that's probably the best way I can describe Nintendo's controllers. if Nintendo is making a bad controller, they know they've made a bad controller. However, if they make a really good one, everyone loves it. Absolutely everyone. So, the final message of the video? I don't know. Don't buy a Wii U.